Hello and welcome to Read Becca. So we are heading into the end of the year, and that means award season. And specifically for this video, we're talking Hugo Awards, which are the major sci-fi and fantasy award that takes place yearly at Worldcon, a massive sci-fi fantasy convention that's traveling around the world. And this ranking is going to be for the novellas. I have managed to follow this award for a long time, but this year I read pretty much all of the novellas without really trying, and I'm almost finished with the novels as well. And so we're going to try and get those rankings up before mid-December when the actual award is announced. So there are 6 novellas on this nominee list, and overall I enjoyed them for the most part. There's not really any consistency though. I found them very wide-ranging in terms of the style and the content. So let's get right into what I thought. We're going to rank them from the bottom to the top. So in 6th place I have Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. Now this was very much a case of it's not you, it's me. I can see objective quality in this novella, but it just was really not for me. This story is all about a trio of monster hunters, and they can see things others cannot. So when they are noticing these white supremacist racists, they are actually realizing that they are humans who are turning into monsters. So we have this whole premise of almost a Lovecraftian evil that is infiltrating and creating racism in this area. And it's beautifully done in terms of the historical adaptation, because this is in a historical setting with horror elements and, as I said, Lovecraftian. So I can see the quality there. But right out of the gate, the first chapter, I didn't get any warnings for this, but the monsters are lured using dog meat. And so the first chapter focuses on that to excess, and to the point I nearly DNF'd the novella. It really turned me off how it was using that as a specific horror writing technique where it primed the reader for emotional response and then came back around through the novella using kind of triggering words that were similar or were used repeatedly in that chapter to create an emotionally manipulative response in the reader. And so that's very common in horror writing. That happens a lot, but I don't like it. And so that was something that put me off right away, and I really struggled with right from the beginning. So this novella set me off on the wrong foot right from the beginning. As I said, I think the quality is there. I did rate this 3 stars almost purely on objective quality. I did not enjoy the reading experience for this one at all. So in 5th place, I have Finna by Nino Cipri. And this one is pretty much the opposite. I found it to be almost entirely just a fun read. I don't understand why it is on the list, though. There was nothing really for me that was particularly noteworthy or award-worthy. This is a story that is set around a couple who work at an IKEA knockoff, and they have to follow an old woman who gets lost in a wormhole, basically, into another dimension. And so there are Lovecraftian elements to this as well, because this multi-dimensional concept involves some very, very weird stuff, very weird worlds with kind of horrific elements. And it involves these 2 characters having recently been a couple and broken up. They're working through their feelings about that and being stuck together through that. So that was kind of interesting, but there just wasn't very much there. It felt a little too light. So it was a fun read. And in terms of the novelty of the IKEA with this multiverse portal, I feel like I have seen that done better in Horror Store, the IKEA concept, versus this novella. So maybe it was something where my own, having read other things similarly, really tainted this because it just didn't have the novelty perhaps that it does for other readers. So it was okay. It was a very fun read, but I don't really see it as award worthy. In fourth, we have, this is a fan favorite, Come Tumbling Down by Sean McGuire. And I enjoyed this one. I really did. And again, I just don't really see that it's award worthy, but it has a lot of popularity, so I can understand why it wound up on this ballot. Come Tumbling Down is a Jack and Jill story, so they have had kind of a through arc in the Wayward Children series. The Wayward Children series is all about this home for wayward children who have found their way into portal worlds and then back into our world and don't feel really like they belong in our world. And so Jack and Jill are a duo who we met in Every Heart a Doorway, but in fact, Down Among the Sticks and Bones was the chronologically first. So that's their backstory. It's how they came to be in their world. Every Heart a Doorway follows after that once they've returned to our world. And then Come Tumbling Down is the fallout from the ending of Every Heart a Doorway, and it ends on some serious drama. So we are dealing with that. I felt like this was very split, though, in terms of the story. It really goes two places. So one is the kind of horror world that they live in, and the other is this place called The Drowned, and I think that's where the next novella upcoming in 2022 is going to be set. So it made sense to set that up, but it felt like it was unfocused because it was split between those two. So overall, it was a very enjoyable book, but especially if you enjoy Jack and Jill's stories, you're going to like this one most likely. But it, again, didn't really feel like it was doing anything award-worthy to me. So I liked the reading experience, but it was okay. So in third, I have A Bright Woman Wanted by Sarah Gailey. And I have loved all of Gailey's work, so this is not really a surprise. I think this one is doing so many interesting things, but it didn't really come together completely for me. So this is set in a maybe far future dystopia that has devolved into an Old West-like setting. So it's very odd because it's got a Western setting and lower technology level. There is the dystopian elements of oppression. So our main character is a lesbian and has just lost the woman that she loves because of that. And so she's turning to the librarians, who are these horseback traveling librarians that pass out approved literature. And they are meant to be these paragons of virtue in the society. But what it turns out is that they are separate from society because they're actually the misfits. And they very much fit who she is and enable her to be who she is, rather than, as she expected, changing her into a purer version of herself. They teach her to accept herself. So there is a beautiful sense of belonging and queerness to this novel that I absolutely love. The pacing, though, feels quite rushed because it's so short, particularly because we get a little bit of a romance in this, and it's not super overt, but it does feel very rushed because of that fact that she's just coming off of losing someone she loves, and now within this very quick pace, very high action novella, she is kind of getting emotionally connected with someone new, and that feels out of place for me. But overall, I really enjoy this one. I enjoy the themes that it's exploring. I enjoy the writing. As I said, I've loved everything from Gailey, so this one I would be very happy if it does win. In second place, I have one of my favorites of the year. This could go really either way for my 1 and 2 pick, and I would be thrilled. This is Riot Baby by Tochi Oyebuchi, and I read this at just the right moment, I think. This one is following a duo who are a brother and sister, and they are living through riots. And for me, I read that in early 2020 when there were riots happening quite literally outside where I live, and the things happening on the page were exactly what was going on in the real world. And so there was this extreme emotional impact to that. So I can't divorce the book from the real world. And for me, that may not be an objective take on the book, but this meant so much to me because of that experience and the timing. So this duo, the sister, has kind of this ability, but it disconnects her from the world. So she becomes somewhat of an observer, and through her, we see discrimination against people of color and criminalization, particularly of her brother. And so we watch her brother go from just being a healthy little boy to being criminalized and ending up in the justice system in the US. And repeatedly he is mistreated, and so we watch that devolution of his life, really, where he is treated as he has no future because he is a Black man. So I think this had so many poignant elements and so much commentary to it about that it really managed to get across in such a short package. As well, from the sister observing, we see things like medical discrimination, minor elements of that, things to do with their family dynamics that were resulting from discrimination. So very, very excellent racial commentary there. And as I said, being in the moment that I read this had the biggest emotional impact on me of all of these novellas. So this was a fabulous book. And finally, in first place, you will probably know what's coming up. It's The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. And this is such a quiet, peaceful novella, but it has such an impact, and not quite the emotional impact that the previous one does, but this does a lot with a very, very little. Now, this one is incredible, and why it's in my top spot is the structure. So we are following a cleric who travels around collecting stories, and in their travels, Chi, the cleric, it has learned about this location being opened up where a former handmaiden to the Empress has retired, basically. And so Chi is going there to find out these stories. Now, each chapter is kind of broken down by a list of items, the current conversation between Chi and this handmaiden, and then the storytelling of the handmaiden explaining this past story of how these items are relevant. So it's got that interesting structural element, and I think that is critical. For me, for something to be award-worthy, it has to engage the reader with all of the tools in the author's toolbox. So if someone is not using the prose specifically to interact with the reader, they may not really have an award-worthy book. And I think this is the novella that engages the reader on every single level, from characterization to plot to world building to the style. It really hit on every single element. As well, it's just a fun read. So as I said, it's kind of quiet, but it really builds up an epic political story in this tiny package. And it catches you unaware in the end, really. I think it's so peaceful, and it feels like you're just getting slice of life moments from this handmaiden that when it delivers the impact at the end, you will be surprised. And on top of that, the characters are just so fun. So Chi is a wonderful little cleric. They are followed around by some sort of mythic being who inhabits the body of a bird, a hoopoe bird, named Almost Brilliance, and they are just a delightful pair to read through. And so you will want to read more from those characters, and I have gone on and read the second novella in this series and loved it almost as much because that sense of storytelling that it captures is so beautiful. So those are my selections, my rankings. I wonder if you agree or disagree with me. I'm sure I will get some disagreements, but I think overall it was a mixed field, but really, really strong in general. And I don't think I would be disappointed if any of these won, which is very rare. Usually there is a standout that I really don't think should win, but even the ones I didn't enjoy as much, I can see merits from. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on the Hugo rankings.